Hey guys, welcome back to Coaster Brothers for another coaster review. And today we are going to be reviewing Sheikra, a B&MDive coaster at Busch Gardens Tampa. Now Sheikra was actually the first dive coaster that B&M decided to take on. So it only has one inversion, the Immelman. As dive coasters expanded, they added more inversions, but this was the very first dive coaster, so it doesn't have as much of a punch. But it is definitely a solid first try from B&M, so without further ado, let's get into the review. Starting things off with height. Sheikra has a height of 200 feet, making it a hypercoaster, B&M hypercoaster. And 200 feet is pretty tall. There are a bunch of hypercoasters out there. Currently, there aren't many dive coasters that are below 200 feet. Like Dr. Diabolical's Cliffhanger is going to be below 200 feet, but I'm very surprised that B&M decided to take on 200 feet as their first dive coaster, considering that they're making dive coasters now that are less than 200 feet. So definitely a solid first try from B&M, 200 feet. That is a great height, not outstanding or anything, but definitely a solid height for this model coaster. So for this category, I am going to be giving an 8. Starting at our next category in speed, Sheikra has a maximum speed of 70 miles per hour, which is only in the beginning part of the coaster. After the Immelman, the speed starts to let up after the first bank turn and then the mid-course, so it doesn't really stay at that 70 miles per hour, but it sure feels graceful the whole way through on this coaster. It feels pretty graceful, and you kind of glide through the entire layout. So for what it is, I'm going to be giving another 8. Next, we have drop. And guys, you already know what I'm going to say for this. It's 10. I'm just going to tell you right now. Because this is a B&M dive coaster. It has a 90-degree drop. And the thing I love about these dive coaster drops is that before you actually drop, you hang there, you slow down, usually go through a curve, as you just saw, and then you slow down, and then you hang there, waiting to drop. So it's not like you're going to get whipped over this drop and get airtime over it. No, but you are sure going to glide out of the seat. And if they don't have the vest restraints like they do on Valraven and Yukon Striker and whatnot, you will sort of get lifted out of your seat in a way. Not too much, though. Just very light floater. But other than that, that's it. But this drop is good for this model coaster. If this was an RMC Hybrids drop, I'd be giving a much lower score. But for dive coasters wise, this is a good drop. So I am going to be giving a 10. Next, we have inversions. Now, Sheikra is one of the weaker dive coasters when it comes to inversions. Sheikra only has one inversion, and that is the Immelman after the first drop. Now, this Immelman is a pretty good Immelman. You get some good hang time at the top. A little bit of hang time, not too much. But for a coaster like Valraven has more inversions. It has a dive loop, and I think a 0G roll. I'm not completely sure. I haven't been on that in a while. I haven't researched or anything. But still, Sheikra, I can understand why it only has one inversion since it was the first dive coaster. But we're not focusing on B&M's first try on this. So I am going to be giving it 5 for inversions. Now, this next category we won't be spending too much time on, and that is airtime. First off, B&M dive coasters, most of them don't focus on airtime, especially Sheikra. I know some of the newer dive coasters have an airtime hill or two. This one does not. You get a little pop of floater off the brake run and off the first drop, but other than that, nothing. So I'm going to be giving it 3. The next category is overall layout. Now, first, Sheikra has a slow turn to the right out of the station. And it does a full U-turn. So now you're facing opposite of the station. And now you slowly make the ascent up the very steep lift hill. Now, when riding this for the first time, this lift hill was steeper than I imagined it to be. From watching all the POVs, I thought it wasn't going to be this steep, but it actually feels really steep. Like you were really on your back on this lift hill. And it is a pretty slow lift hill, considering this is one of the older B&Ms. The older B&Ms didn't have as fast of lift hills. So this is a pretty slow lift hill, guys. But remember, you are at a very steep angle. You get a pretty good view once you're at the top. Now, once you make the top, you make another slow U-turn facing back in the direction you came from. You get a good view of the park. You get a good view of Tampa and the treetops. And then you get Falcon's Ferry right there in Coomba. And then you slowly make your way to the edge. Then you hang here for about 3 seconds, awaiting the drop. And then you're dropping 90 degrees. It's a very smooth drop. You really glide through it. Then you glide through this Immelman right here. You get a nice head chopper effect right there, since you're going right under the mid-course. Then you turn up into the mid-course. The mid-course really slows you down, but you don't wait for the second drop. You just drop right out of there. You dive through this, Egyptian, building or whatever. And you make another bank turn into the splashdown. And I actually really like this section. Not from on the ride, but from off the ride. You get some good footage, and it's a good interactive thing with the guests. And then you make one final turn into the final brake run. So overall, I kind of find a little bit of a repetitive layout. After the drop in the Immelman, it's really just turn after turn. After the Immelman, a bank turn up into the brake run, then a drop, then another turn, splashdown, then another turn. So I found this a pretty repetitive ride. And the only reason I really like it is from the Immelman, the first drop, and then the second drop. And I love that splashdown, but it is a pretty repetitive ride. So I'm going to be giving a 7. Now it's time to talk about smoothness. Guys, Sheikra is a buttery smooth coaster. I mean, that's my experience with most B&Ms. Some B&Ms have a rattle, others with slight rattle, others with a strong rattle. I didn't experience any rattle or roughness on Sheikra whatsoever. It was just buttery smooth the whole way through. It just glided through its layout. It felt so graceful. No bumpiness, no roughness at all. So I'm going to be giving a 10. Now, we're going to be talking about restraints. Now, typically, I do not like these typical B&M over-the-shoulder restraints. I find them very bulky and very causing of headbanging. On all the floorless coasters, all the inverted coasters I've been on, I usually get headbanging unless I literally jam my head as forward as possible. But on Sheikra, there's no headbanging whatsoever. I do not mind these restraints at all. It's a very unusual case. I usually hate these things. But on Sheikra, I do not mind them whatsoever because there's no way to get headbanging. That's only if you get whipped through the inversions like you do on corkscrews, cobra rolls, 0G rolls, that kind of stuff. But this is a very smooth gliding Immelman, and that is it. That's the only inversion. So I got no headbanging, no clunkiness, nothing like that, guys. And these seats are already comfortable. They're floorless, so they allow tons of leg room. No matter where you're sitting, there's going to be leg room. These are floorless trains, so I am going to be giving, they're not perfect, but I'm going to be giving a 9. Alright, so I have no footage to show for this next category because I couldn't get any station footage. But our next category is operations. Now, Sheikra, when I went, the last time I went to Busch Gardens, had some terrible operations. Some of the worst operations I've ever seen on a roller coaster. Now, I'm not sure if these are consistent operations or if these are the operations that usually go on with Sheikra, but I'm just basing this off my personal experience on this coaster. And guys, they were dispatching trains every 6 to 8 minutes, guys. They were doing terrible. They checked all the restraints, but then they waited 5 more minutes to dispatch them. And this wasn't just a one-time thing, guys. For every single train they were doing this, it was 15 trains in a row where it was each taking 6 to 8 minutes. And guys, that is some awful operations. Now I came back to the ride 2 hours later, and it was the same operations. Not as bad, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, but that is still not too good. So I averaged out, and the average operations for Sheikra were 4 minutes long. And that is not even close to average. That is bad. So I am going to be giving a 4 for operations. finally, theming is our final category. And guys, you won't see too much theming on Sheikra. Sheikra has a small theme to like an African hawk or whatever. That's what a Sheikra is, like an Asian African hawk. But other than that, there's no theming for this other than the entrance sign. But we're not just talking about theming in this theming category. We are also going to be talking about that splashdown, guys. That splashdown, the cool interaction with the guests that it has, the onlookers, people who want to ride Sheikra, they can look at that splashdown. You get really up close. You get to see the coaster come by, that cool splashdown effect. I find that very cool, and I consider that theming. Not really theming, but it's something cool that has to do with the coaster that isn't just track, supports, and the train. And another thing that I sort of consider theming is those like Mayan/Egyptian buildings that you dive through out of the brake run. Because after the first run, you go through the Immelman, then you go through that first turn into the brake run, and then out of that brake run, you drop through these like Egyptian buildings that are like worn down and stuff. I find that really cool. I don't know exactly what they are, but they definitely look really cool. And there's some cool stone along the side of the splashdown. So overall, I'm going to be giving it an 8. And finally, the final score for Sheikra is an 8. This is not a perfect coaster. This isn't the best coaster in the world, but it is definitely pretty good coaster. It definitely fits Busch Gardens Tampa for sure. This is definitely a good coaster to have at this park. This used to be the best coaster in Busch Gardens Tampa, but Iron Gwazi came along and stole that from Sheikra. Sheikra is definitely a great number 2 for this park, though, than number 3, Cheetah Hunt, so on. But this is definitely a great dive coaster, definitely one of the best, one of the originals. And yeah, so I'm going to be wrapping up our review here. I hope you enjoyed. If you want to see more reviews like this, coaster vlogs, and so much more, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and definitely comment down below. And I will see you guys on the thrill side of life.